Have you tried
Yeah.
Perplexity already?
I have not tried Perplexity. No. Have you tried it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say it's my default search engine. In general,
Really?
like, yeah, and so like, I'm incredibly excited to try out SearchGPT. I haven't tried out Bing and stuff like that. But when hopefully when AI and crypto meet, there's going to be fun intersections there too. But yeah, the products they stand by themselves. Um, my take on the open AI stuff. I mean, obviously the Llama stuff is really, really incredibly great. Just open source AI.
Yeah.
Really catching up to the frontier. But like the open AI thing, like if you follow the Anon accounts, they were all kind of disappointed because like, oh, they thought, well, DeepMind released was it Alpha Proof, right? And so it's like, where's Q Star if you've heard that before? And so
Mm.
it was not disappointing from a product perspective, but maybe from like a like, oh, are they pushing the edge? Like, are they going to drop GPT-5 and stuff like that? It was slightly disappointing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, it always, I mean, it takes so much effort to train a new model like this. You literally need, entire server farms to get something
Hmm.
like that going, which is why Nvidia has been doing so amazingly well, and it will probably continue to do well for as long as AI is going to exist. And I don't think it's a fad. I think it's here to stay, and we just see that with every other iteration of a new model or new use cases for the model.
And not investment advice, but do you hold any Nvidia
Yeah,
stock?
100%. No financial advice. Buy it
Yeah,
at your own peril.
yeah, 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 yeah. And
So this
we wish
perplexity
we.
stuff, is it like a search engine, like an AI search engine? I haven't used it.
Yeah, it's AI search engine. Classic. Like, hey, you see this box, and then you can kind of chat with it. It'll bring up like five links to summarize it. So like, I would say like the Google stuff, like the Bing stuff and like Search GPT, they're all very similar. And so, but like search is not really differentiating in the form factor. It's like how fast is it and how good are the results? And from my usage, like I can talk with it and like when you need to like do kind of like a quick calculation, for example, like, I don't know, like light budgeting, like hey, like I'm trying to purchase this couch. Like, is it really worth it? I want to do some girl math on it, maybe. It can help do it in line as well as bring up like, oh, these are the average prices or whatever. That's a stupid example, but
Right, that's a good example.
it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been using the ChatGPT app for that purpose, right? I've been using it
Hmm.
to kind of talk to it, and just asking random stuff. Like I've been trying to do a new Elden Ring playthrough because the DLC is out, and I've been trying to like
Mm.
start from scratch again and then kind of get into the DLC, right? So I'm a bit of a completionist when I play games. I want to like go and get all the achievements, get all the items and those swords and stuff. So I find myself constantly talking to GPT. Hey, do you know where I can find like the Moonblade, the Moonveil katana
Yeah.
and stuff? And you'll tell me, oh, you need to go to that area and get up on that legend and just pick up the loot and stuff. And what I've noticed is that when it works, it really works, and it's
Mm.
amazing. But when it doesn't work, it can be really frustrating because a lot of times, not a lot, but a significant amount of times, I'm being sent or I'm being given information that's completely inaccurate. It still hallucinates. And I think probably Perplexity and all the others AI have a certain degree of hallucination. I'm just wondering how far away we are, or if at all possible, that we can completely remove that hallucination.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not an AI expert in that field, so I don't really know exactly how I would go about removing that kind of error.
Well, I mean, like you said, smarter people than me and you. Like, hopefully they'll figure it out. But I'm actually curious more on your usage of the voice mode, like, and like, so like you because that's just like not a pattern that I've gotten in. Whether it's like maybe I like to listen to music and things like that, and so like that's usually what's playing. And so I'm actually curious, like, is it only when you do Elden Ring and stuff, or are you also kind of like using it as like a virtual office and like, oh, if there's a research task, like you'll just have ChatGPT listening, kind of, or I don't know. I'm curious to hear.
Yeah. I sometimes use it. I've been trying to incorporate the voice element in my development and programming time as well. So if
Mm,
I need something that's not like a massive function or something that's really long and something that I can easily digest, more like a high level concept, like, hey, can you explain to me how a monad works real quick? Right. And then I just ask it
hmm.
that, and then kind of I process it as I go through my code. I find that it works. If I need more
Mm,
specific stuff, or if I need, assistance with a certain function, or hey, build me this class or build me this interface, I'm gonna have to most likely just get it in text, because I'm
Mm,
going to need the text as an output as well. But I think we're getting to more. I think that the thing that I'm really excited about is that AI used across different devices in this form is going to create a more natural interface between us and machines. Um,
hmm
and voice is obviously one step, right? But then there can be another step from there. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with something called the crown. It's
mm,
like a neural device, but unlike the Neuralink, you don't actually need to drill a hole in your brain to install it, right? You put it on your head, and it captures the electricity
hmm
impulses of your brain, like the neural impulses, and you can then use a JavaScript SDK to connect to this
hmm
thing and to program it. So all you need to do is you need to train it. So you can train it by getting it to detect certain thought patterns. If you constantly think of a cube moving up, you can train it to detect that, and then at some point you can just think of that, and it will. You can program it to do anything virtually, right? Because it's a JavaScript SDK. You can build any library on top of it. Every time you make that thought pattern, it can deliver something to you. And you could
hmm
take it a step further. If that would be more advanced, you could even get it to detect language questions, thoughts that it can decode into words or questions, and then you could interact with the web through just thinking about those questions. It sounds kind of
So
crazy, but like it's not impossible.
no, no. I mean, honestly, I'm there with you. And actually, there's three things, and like first, I mean, I kind of want to go through them just to get your quick responses and focus on the last thing because what you just brought up is the most interesting. Is first, so just so I understand your kind of like usage of like GPT, like you'll have your AirPods in or whatever, and then you'll just have like either your phone or like ChatGPT like desktop, and you'll just have it always on in voice mode. Is that correct? Kind of.
So it's not always on. It's just I have it on my phone, right?
hmm
And I go on I literally go to the ChatGPT app,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then I tap,
And then you'll do voice mode. I see.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the second thing, there's, and this is kind of just a reference to like what you said about like AI is getting better and then hallucinating or like hopefully less is like, I think I like this 5 step framework. And like, obviously, like we've seen it with self driving cars. And that was like, oh, L1 autonomy versus like L5. And like, well, finally, Waymo finally on the streets and stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I think like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it wasn't like a crazy thing. It's just like how I guess internally OpenAI thinks about the development, and it was like chatbots, I guess like reasoners, agents, or I want to say like innovators, and then organizations. And so like I really like that framework, and it seems pretty practical. But really just sets the course of like, yeah, they're working on reasoning now, and that's like maybe 10 prompts, right? And then
Right.
agents, well, maybe hundreds, right? And I think that this is kind of where it gets into crypto, and maybe what we do at Common is like, okay, you're going to have multiple agents. Like, well, they still will need incentives. And then second, when um, it's just interesting. But on the last thing that you kind of talked about, um, I mean, I'm a big sci-fi fan, and obviously, like the world gets more sci-fi every day. And I recently read Rick Kurzweil's Singularity is Nearer, OG
Yeah.
inspiration. He released his update, and when you talk about the crown, it is the world we're going. Like, so I believe it. It's happening, whether we like it or not, or maybe our kids will like it more, or something like
Yeah.
that.
For sure. It's definitely going in that direction. I didn't read his update on the book, but I heard him speak about the book. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He had a long
hmm
conversation about the topic. And the thing that I found really interesting that he still believes that I think it's 2040 or 2042 that according to him we're going to reach singularity. Now, for people that don't know, singularity is we're going to a millionfold our current level of intelligence to the point that we are
hmm
beyond humans, right? So uh, that's just insane to quite grasp, right? To believe, really. I do believe we've had like an exponential growth in
hmm
uh, technology and what we can do with it. It's just, yeah. I don't know, man. I hope he's right. I just feel like some things are just a bit like his theory of reversing the aging process, right? According to him, we're
Hmm.
going, what was that, 4 months, we're getting 4 months
Hmm.
every year back, and within the next 15 years, he said that we will probably get the whole 12 months back in a year cycle, meaning that we would eventually stop aging, and at some point we'll reverse the aging process. 15 years is not a long time if you think about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm not sure exactly like where I stand with how reasonable that is.
It's I mean, I agree with you just because it belies like expectation. It just like feels crazy. But I mean, to a certain extent, he wasn't wrong on the human level reason. I won't say reasoning, right? But certainly we have all experienced GPT-4, right?
Yeah.
And so it's worth taking into consideration and like adjusting, I feel like, and like obviously we're already talking about it. But hey, I've got my protein shake here, trying to stay
Love it, man.
healthy. But you said something. Oh, on the intelligences and like having a millionfold. This is how my brain works. But also recently, like the metaphor, like whenever I try to think about like what a world looks like in that case, right, post singularity, everyone talks about and like you brought up Neuralink, and like it's we have to merge with the machines, right? But in the case that some people don't choose to, I feel like there's always like two pictures that come to mind, and one kind of most recently, just because it was posted on Twitter, was like the Amazon tribe. Like there was a new Amazon tribe that just like came out of the rainforest and had,
Right.
yeah, I think you saw that, right? It was because like maybe a logging site, sadly got like very close or something. But it's like, wow. Um,
You're
Obviously,
talking
there's.
about, sorry to
Sorry, go
interrupt.
ahead.
You're
Yeah.
talking about the Amazon tribe that got Starlink, got internet access. They were happy with it for a while, and then they got addicted to pornography. Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh no, I didn't know about this. I would.
Ah,
That's very very interesting. I mean, probably related. Like I guess what I'm referencing is I saw on Twitter, I think this past week, and I feel like this happens like every once in a while. Is like uncontacted Amazon tribe like stumbles out of the forest and was like captured by imaging, and like they saw loggers or something like that near their, I guess, like living site. And so I guess the metaphor I'm trying to draw is like, wow, like that is a way of life that I guess we have lived for thousands of years. And I mean, of course, like GDP per capita, whatever you want to say, intelligence has increased, and like we have a whole society. And so for the case of people who don't choose to merge with the machines, right? Like maybe it's just going to be like that. We're going to wake up one day and it's like, oh wow, society's really changed, but very sci-fi, very crazy. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think it's going to be a choice, and some people will just choose to live a organic lifestyle,
Hmm.
unaltered and everything. And I think it's, yeah, there's going to be different, just completely different realities as there are today. People live, like you said,
Hmm.
in wildly different ways, right? Like life in the city, completely different than life on a farm, right?
Hmm.
um, Even though they kind of converge, because you can still have all the farm elements, but you can have internet and you can have, like, cars and other technology, mobile phones, and all that. It's all
Yeah.
very fascinating, and I'm really enjoying to see where it all goes, and that there's a lot of people out there building amazing things, like
Hmm.
yourself, and like your own products that you're building with Common. And I thought this might be actually be a good moment to kind of talk about how you got into crypto and how you got
Hmm.
building Common, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Well, from the this part of the conversation, as you can tell, I'm also a really big fan of technology and all its shapes and forms, and thinking about the future. And I guess like back in 2013, so this was like high school going into college. One of the things I was thinking about or looking at and or just experienced was getting Bitcoin and purchasing it for the first time. Back then, it was just like Bitcoins, right,
Yeah.
plural, which I think is so funny. Um, it didn't really leave that too big of an impact on me like at that time, but like I think my real down the rabbit hole moment was when I first started mining on dorm electricity for ETH. And it's like, oh, it's not just talking online with people. It's not just like getting this thing through, a centralized, Coinbase, right? I use that. Everyone has it.
Yeah.
Um, it was like earning it and like participating in something. That's kind of what inspired me, and really, kind of from there, it's been the whole professional career since college. So prior to kind of like working on this product specifically, started Commonwealth Labs. Commonwealth Labs product studio started in 2017, 2018, and we worked on a few different things. First thing was called Edgeware, and we did a new token distribution method at the time. It was called the lock drop, and like just like folks launch layer twos and things like that, it's just deposit your ETH and get some new tokens. And so at the time we had I think like 3% of ETH locked up. So
Of all
it
ETH.
was crazy. Of all ETH, yeah, at the time. That's
That's
crazy,
pretty
right?
crazy. Yeah. So you
I
said you
mean,
worked on
great.
something called Edgeware. What's Edgeware?
Yeah, Edgeware. So it's technically still live today, community run. But Edgeware is and was basically a Polkadot smart contract platform,
Okay.
and it was all ideally community run, and so 90% was allocated and given away through this lock drop mechanism. 5% in the treasury, 5% to like contributors at the time, and but I don't know. It's just interesting that as a time capsule, I think, and what has been taken up and what stayed around. Um, but the thing that really captured my attention was like the aspect of coordination. Maybe less so in like kind of like, oh, here's a general purpose contract platform. Um, Problem that we faced, problem that we saw participating in the original DAO. For listeners who know or don't know, um, there was the DAO, right?
Yep. Yep.
Back in 2016 and had more like double digit percentages of ETH and ended up having a smart contract vulnerability. And well, now we had the hard fork, and that was a big thing, right? Um, but the way to coordinate around that and decide if this was a thing to do, there's no on-chain governance, something that we take for granted today. But like basically that problem of coordination, of voting, of talking and problem solving together is what most interested myself. And that really leads us to today. We wanted to solve our own problem, so we built Common. So really, in short, we're a forum with built-in governance and rewards. So ideally, being able to launch or bring your own, do token voting, do all these things, and make sure all that stuff happens in one place. That's the long and short of it, and kind of I don't know what keeps me going.
Yeah, I mean it's a cool story, man. And just go back for a second on the locked ETH in during the DAO times. There's actually a
Yeah.
direct link there because the author of the DAO smart contract was actually working with Vitalik and with Gavin Wood on Ethereum as well. His name's
Hmm.
Christoph Zench. Had a chat with the guy, and he's also um, he built on Ethereum, more specifically the C wrapper, I think C++ or C wrapper for Ethereum client. But then they had some financial issues back in 2016, 2015, 2016. They had to cut down all of the like budget for most teams. So the only one that remained, I think, was the Golang team. Um,
Mm,
which is why that's the Ethereum
standard.
client wrapper
Yeah.
that they use today. So it's not surprising that they had access to so much ETH because they were part of also of
Hmm.
the foundation itself at the time, which is pretty crazy
Oh,
times,
that's
man.
juicy.
It is juicy. It's the most successful ICO that's ever been, probably, and it's incredible
Yeah.
how much more disruptive it is on top of Bitcoin, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, wow. Takes me back. We've come a long way. I mean, obviously ETH, ETF and stuff like that. It's crazy how
Yeah.
these cast of characters and what's happened, but yeah.
It's also crazy how the market attitudes have changed because Bitcoin and Ethereum, people starting at the people starting with those at the very beginning, you had almost like a distrust in the system, right? Like Bitcoin, the reason for Bitcoin was a response to the financial crisis of 2008. That's why it was launched
Hmm.
in 2008. Distrust in the government, the global financial system, and this kind of, we can do it ourselves. We don't need
Hmm.
a global, a centralized government to in between, right? Cash transfers. Um, and then all of a sudden, 2024, the market's like, oh yeah, BlackRock's on board now. Yay, guys, we made it.
Hmm.
It's interesting to notice,
Yeah,
how it all started and where we ended up. And I guess it
you're
was
so right.
inevitable.
I mean, it's well, it's I like to think of it as still a third way, right? And I think it's the same thing. I think someone on our team said this is like uh it's okay, classic metaphor of like Web 2 feeds, right? Are we controlling the feed or is the feed controlling us, right? And so in
Right.
the same way, right, it's like, oh, okay, is Ethereum running? I don't obviously it's not running BlackRock, right? but have to hold the native ETH. They have to use custody. They have to, or sorry, like they have to participate in the ecosystems, right? And so in that way, it's a third way, and maybe the system becomes a little bit more neutral over time. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see those dynamics play out, though. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's just people had different expectations of what adoption was going to be. I think
Mm.
people expected adoption is going to be, oh, fuck the system, we're just doing it ourselves, and then eventually realize that, like, realistically, adoption is an organic integration. You making space for this technology to exist within the current system. But it often starts with like the ideological, right, the ideal case scenario, the thing you can't quite reach but you kind of always
Hmm.
move towards, and then you settle for something that's achievable, which is where we're at. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's the only thing that could have happened, I think.
And and there's still time, but I guess like the thing that I feel like still captures my attention and is this there's pockets of it. It shows up differently in terms of the FU attitude or whatever. Like, could be on a different chain, it could be on things like that, but I feel like it's still around. But I don't know. This is kind of on a personal note, but it's like that ability to still coordinate around any idea, around anything, is like the thing that still gets me. And it's like, well, that's hopefully what I want to continue to build around. But I think we'll get there, and it doesn't just have to be like fully adopted by or just purely financialized. There are other use cases. And I'm excited about those.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. So tell me, what are, in your opinion, the founding principles of Common, and what's the, I guess, the biggest issue that you guys are trying to solve right now?
So the way I like to think about it is definitely those concentric rings of like problems. So first, kind of last started with our own. So it's like, hey, do have to run Edgeware. It's totally community run. So how are we going to make decisions? How we need a UI to vote, literally.
Yeah.
Um, and then but, outside of that, like we just talking about the DAO, like I remember when I think literally like coin.vote, or I actually don't remember the page, but snapshot before snapshot, right? So it was like a nice signaling page to show the yes or no's on like should we hard fork or not. It feels like those were kind of like other things that people were trying to deal with, right? Because CoinDesk, as much as like they're great channels for distribution, they're not great
Hmm.
for decision making. Um, and then honestly, like I think like you can kind of frame like the problems that we faced, that kind of crypto is dealing with. And I mean, I still think advancing with DAOs, with on-chain voting, with these other things, with coins in general. It's a problem that society is facing, right? So like there's the public spaces are really noisy. Obviously, there's a lot of polarization. I'm based here in the States, and these past few weeks have been pretty intense for the election. Um,
Yeah.
and so just making decisions and talking and like knowing what's truth, what's not. Yeah, that's kind of the problem space that I feel like that we deal with. So from our own to crypto to hopefully society in the long term.
Yeah, that's a cool thing to focus on. There's You're absolutely right. There's just so much noise, and
Hmm.
I feel like people, everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion that they can voice freely out there, but it makes it incredibly difficult to find some sort of cohesion. And usually, especially when you're talking about topics like politics, that just tends to divide people more than bring people together.
Hmm.
And platforms like Twitter, platforms like social media platforms, I feel like they divide society a lot more than it appears to be in real life. Like, if you're
Hmm.
in real life and you're talking to someone who's maybe you're a Democrat, they're a Republican, like, you're not just gonna go and throw insults at each other and just then turn your back at them and, like, I've blocked you, I'm not gonna talk to you anymore. And I
Hmm.
feel like it only allows people to express that side of themselves online because of the anonymity and because of the fact that there's no real repercussions to behaving antisocially online, in a sense. Like, they don't, like, people, I don't feel like they see the digital world as real. I feel like they
Hmm.
see it as this kind of, maybe, I don't know, free for all kind of Wild West in a way, which is interesting because in many ways it's a lot more controlled. Every action that you perform online is more controlled and more monitored than actions in real life.
I agree with you, and I think like the phrase that kind of comes to mind is like making it real and like bringing value on chain, and obviously like Bitcoin. If we want to use the metaphor of like Bitcoin is digital gold, it's a coin, and it works for that use case. It brings that value online, or online. I should say. I was going to say on chain, but online still works. And like I think like the thing, so because like what I described was like such like a society thing is like, oh, how are you going to change the fabric of society and how people discuss? I feel like it's around like giving giving like form to those ideas. So really coins. So like there's this meme coin phenomena that's happening. There's these prediction markets. Of course, we've seen kind of like layer ones and alternative kind of collections to show NFT collections to show like what people like
Yeah.
and dislike. But those are ways to make your voice real, and that enough gives space. And I feel like that's already a more productive way to like talk about things rather than just like tweet about things or things like that. So small steps, small steps.
Yeah. So would you say, is it what makes it real in your opinion? Is it the community aspect of it? Is it the monetary aspect? Is it the fact that people have to put a dollar behind their stake, effectively just saying, "Hey, I actually am invested in this," rather than just doing it just by tweeting stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say kind of all three, but like I can talk you through maybe just like top down. So it's like, okay, if online made like sending information back and forth in real time and like gave the power for everyone to do that, like on-chain does it, and it does it with value. That's maybe not like a groundbreaking thing to say, but okay, what is value? Like you said, it's the dollar, or it's money. It could be social influence, and then it could be
Mm.
like power, so like the vote. And so anything that you need to sign, right, literally, is something that I feel like has value. So signature on a lease, on a receipt,
Right.
a monetary transfer, or I don't know, like a power of attorney. That's like a thing that some might have to do with end of life care or things like that. Yeah, anything that has that weight being brought on chain, I would say is good. Uh,
Mm.
it just is tough to deal with, and in terms of UI and UX, but I think we're stepping in the right direction with frames, Farcaster, things that we're thinking about internally. But I kind of digress from your question, so you can feel free to rein me in. Yeah.
No, it's cool. As I was interested in, also in the, obviously, decision making process and governance is a huge
Hmm.
topic for you. I'm guessing personally as well as for the organization in general. Um, what are the, I guess, mechanisms that Common allows users to do? I guess in order to simplify the decision making process and to make it
Hmm.
more transparent and easier to navigate.
So I guess like the first thing, kind of starting with the problem, is like, oh, the information's in a bunch of different places, and second, it's really hard to vote in general, or it used to be, um, just because like you might have to log in with a CLI and like directly like interact with your terminal to vote. You have to aggregate the opinions of different people to make an informed decision. So an idea might start on Twitter, like we kind of talked about, and ideally we bring that all into one place.
Hmm.
And so the kind of solution that we've come to is basically like a forum. So people might know us as a discourse replacement. So you might see us, you log in with your wallet, you can have multiple topics on the forum, and then you can turn it into a snapshot proposal and then on-chain vote. Um, there's so many nuances to that. Like, oh, in some ways, while like we can talk about like core development on Ethereum, like not
Right.
everyone attends the core dev call, right? And so sometimes you need to gate spaces. And so whether it's token ownership or off-chain actions, those are ways to gate a topic. Um, Yeah, so those are always the things that we're kind of like innovating on essentially, and it's been pretty successful. Thankfully, we've been able to weather, I guess, some bear markets.
Yeah.
We hit a peak. Yeah, gosh, crazy. Um, we hit a peak of 100,000 weekly actives last quarter or this quarter, I guess.
Wow, that's huge. Congrats.
Um, yeah, it's been fun. And who knew so many people wanted to talk about things that move their community forward. Always trying to expand, but really it comes back to that is like whatever it takes to make that process from like tweet to conversation to vote to, pushed on-chain action or executed on-chain action, we want to help with. Um, yeah, and it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and I think it's a great tool that in a space that's becoming more globalized, but at the same time more tribalized. It's
Mm,
a great
yeah.
tool to help with from small organizations, small groups of people building stuff for just for fun to big, uh, really big projects like Ethereum. I'm guessing it's a tool that anyone or any community could use if they wanted to use it.
Yeah, and like it's interesting to see the ins and outs of like small to large as well. Like, but at the end of the day, it is people still moving things forward. We don't have those chatbots. We don't have reasoners yet, and so at the end of the day, it's a thread, it's a conversation, and it's a vote. And so just building around that core loop is something that we work towards. Sorry, I'm gonna mute myself real quick.
That's cool. Um, so I noticed on your website that you had two case studies that you published recently, one with 1inch and one with Links DAO. And I thought Links DAO was really interesting because it's a DAO for, I think, golf courses, if I got that right. I'm really curious about like your involvement within helping this decentralized golf community organize themselves. I think you're still on mute, by the way.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I mean, thank you for bringing that up. It's one of the things that I think thought is, I don't know, the one of the cooler things, just because I think we always think about the on-chain world being digital gold, new DeFi, or NFTs or meme coins and things like that.
Hmm.
And so to see a group kind of go from, a crowdfund to kind of for different memberships to talking about purchases of different golf courses on the site is just super cool. So they've been around for, wow, I don't want to get this wrong. Uh, 2021, I want to say. Dudas started LinksDAO and now works with, I guess Coop is helping lead it. But that's been just cool to see because, like you said, that's an example of like a smaller community, so to speak, rather than like a 1 inch that you kind of talked about. Um, and then, I mean, on the 1 inch side, like uh, a big fan of the product when I needed to swap and things like that.
Hmm.
I feel like the thing that I've found most interesting has been like the recognized delegates program to help drive forward kind of conversation.
Right.
So yeah, and are people familiar with this maybe, or do you think I should kind of go into it?
Yeah, I think going into it a bit, it would help for sure.
Yeah, so um, I think one of the voter participation is low in general, right? So whether it's democratic elections or even on chain, and it's for any number of reasons. It's hard to use the UX. It's tough to understand kind of the issues, and then well, life gets in the way. Um, And one of the things that I think 1inch has done really well is beyond, first like being able to onboard to us, kind of from the other big gorilla in the room of discourse. Uh, they also started to with a recognized delegates program. And so what is that? It's basically like, hey, if you're participating, you have some amount of 1inch ownership of
Hmm.
two active participation, and you're actively driving the community forward, you'll be compensated. And so I feel like that's been really cool to see kind of as part of both like the end to end and
Yeah.
onboarding. Yeah, so small to large communities, I feel like has been it's just been so cool. Uh, Lots of
Yeah.
cool things to coordinate around.
And I'm guessing you're in a position where it's like common is that kind of product. I would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like an infrastructure layer or infrastructure kind of service where you obviously get all of these other organizations to then build their decision making on top of your tool, using common. So that puts you in a unique situation that you can actually see what are the cool communities that are coming out, maybe more so than other people in the crypto world would. um, and I'd be curious to hear some examples of what are the, like, maybe the funny, cool, weird kind of communities that have come out of that are using common that maybe not a lot of people know about.
Oh, man, there's so many. I guess like let me think. So I guess like the first thing that comes to mind is like we usually do have a lot of the larger ones. And the reason for that is a lot of folks like do use us as a forum, like when conversation gets more serious, so to
Hmm.
speak, or gets larger to have that kind of noise-free place. Um, but the things we've started to see, so the way we think about things, I guess is like, oh, like we're trying to create engagement loops for these communities or help with this, right? And governance is one of them, from creating the post, from voting, and then ideally maybe some reward at the end.
Yeah.
And two other loops are like, oh, like, contests. So what's the top post of the week? Something that Reddit does. But the first loop is like launching. And as we've rolled out like products that kind of start from the beginning, so to speak, we've definitely seen smaller ones. Um, there's a beer DAO that's been created. Uh, what else? That
That's
was just the first that
fantastic.
comes to mind. Yeah.
Love a beer DAO. What's the
I
name of the
think
beer
like
DAO?
I think it's literally just beer man. I want to say,
Classic.
uh, and um, this is so funny. There's actually a beerman.com. So like, not product placement or product advertising, but that's I don't know. It exists outside of that. Um, Other things, I mean, DeSci, so like VitaDAO, you know, the world is larger than DeFi. We don't have that many NFT projects, but like the Treasure DAOs of the world, we will have some meme coins that will be launching soon. So, again,
Interesting.
not financial advice, but I think that's a super interesting kind of like both category and then use case of like how people are engaging, both with their product and the ecosystem. So as those kind of come out, I'll probably tweet as a follow up to this.
That's cool. That is seriously cool. Obviously, there's going to be so many unprecedented use cases for
Hmm.
for for common that you wouldn't expect until you see people onboarding. Like, huh, they're doing that. Wow. Um,
Is there
so
is there sorry to cut you off. I'm curious, like, is there some like pie in the sky things that you kind of wished exist as either projects, protocols, or I don't know, things like those are things I'm always interested in.
Yeah, there are. Well, when it comes to governance, like I'm fascinated in the idea of governance in general, and
Hmm.
creating a governance process that is fair and without bad actors, or with keeping that as a minimum, and also without corruption, right? So for a while, I've been thinking about this. A solution, right, to actually
Hmm.
govern nations, right? A different form of governance than the one we have right now, because politicians and are tend to be sometimes corrupt or
Hmm.
willing to serve their own interests. That creates a less than fair environment where you're expected that these are experts in the field that are looking out for people, but it turns out that they're looking out for themselves. And then if people have to benefit from that, it's more almost like a side, almost like an afterthought, right? Like everyone
Hmm.
in power wants more power. They don't want, or very few of them ever want, to do the will of the people, right? And I feel like people feeding in to vote, going to vote, doesn't really change the process that much. It's
Hmm.
usually the same kind of, right, you've changed the president and then maybe the cabinet changes, but then ultimately the people that were in power at the NSA and CIA and all these other agencies are going to be the same people that have been in power for 20 years, and the status quo is going to continue, right? So I've always been really interested in a form of governance for nations that is fair, right?
Hmm.
And I think where we are today is definitely better than when we were a couple hundred years ago, but it's far from ideal, right? And you can take examples from different areas, from different points in history, and some of them could probably be applicable today. One idea that I like is Plato's Republic and his idea of philosopher kings, right? Like getting people, training them up, whose sole purpose is, okay, you're going to be one of the decision makers for this nation's future, so we're going to take you from really young and give you the best education, give you everything that you need to develop into a human being that has like qualities that are considered to be good, right?
Hmm.
um, that's one example, right? And I would love to see some more variation of that, even to see some kind of virtual representations, or just someone running mock tests on what would the world be like if we
Hmm.
change governments to be from this to this, or if we reduce
Hmm.
corruption. So that's something that I'm constantly coming up with, and I think that potentially bringing, at least bringing voting on chain, online, even people can't even vote online, right? We've got people, I know I have a few friends that have to vote for the US elections coming up in November. They live in London, so they have to go through this process where it takes them weeks to submit their ballot,
Hmm.
because they have to do it by mail, and half of the time it arrives, half it doesn't.
Hmm.
And it's super difficult. So I think even starting there, making voting online is probably a start, and then we can deal with corruption.
Well, no, I mean, honestly, the things that you've talked about, I have so many thoughts on, and it's really the truth of the problems that we face, and like especially like, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Like our online spaces are only adding to it, but like sometimes, like electronic voting, they could be the answer. Some shout outs here. Like there's some really great work, at least here in the States, around e-voting, like
Okay.
Voting Works, and stuff like that. And again, it's kind of what you talked about of like, oh, sometimes governments are the last to change, and certainly the last to adopt e-voting. And um, but super great stuff. There's a lot of like interesting things both around encryption, both around just like the OPSEC of dealing with like like, do you still need to go to the voting site? Is it totally mobile? That people are thinking about very, very deeply. Um, but I mean, maybe the more general comment that I feel like is interesting, and like hopefully like, and the reason I asked is like, one, that's what crypto kind of is. It is a grand experiment,
It's a fair point.
both in terms of uh, just new institutions. And like, I that is actually one thing that I also hope to see is like at least within crypto, and then well, hopefully we can replicate this in other forms as both well, crypto gets more accepted on Wall Street in other industries as that form of governance getting rolled out too, right? So it doesn't have to be one person, or sorry, one coin, one vote. It could be, based on direct usage, right? It could be based on of the product. I mean, it could be based on like contributions on GitHub. Those could
Right.
be things that directly respond. Um, but yeah, I don't know. So it's cool, and like I'm definitely really happy to see kind of just like the continued development of this, more experiments, more coins, and I feel like that continues to drive innovation forward.
Oh yeah, 100%. And every time you see an organization that does things differently, that works, it's another confirmation that a different form of governance is probably okay. And we have
Hmm.
tools now where we can do things that were completely impossible in the past, right? Like, you could make it so easy for people to vote and submit their feedback and thoughts, that you could actually have a deep understanding of everyone's opinion, and you can quantify that, you can take that through machine learning, you can visualize it, you can plot it, you can really get such a really really good grasp of the general consensus that you were not able to in the past. Which actually brings me to a question
Yeah.
about this. Do you guys offer any of that visualization of like being able to view people's thoughts on a subject?
The honest answer is right now, no. I would definitely be interested to see and hear kind of what folks have. That said, uh, every post, every thread, every obviously vote is already on chain and signed, and we have a very soon to be open kind of managed API to make that all that data like super easy and ingestible. And so whether it's plugging that data into GPT or Claude or what have you, I would be interested to see that, and then we can bring that back into the product. I don't know, like what kind of visualizations like do you find to be effective? Like, is it like the word clouds, or there's also so many nuance when it comes to like types of positions and like for or against certain things, and especially when it comes to like 1,000 word posts and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, well, with the forum, I'm thinking like some form of visualizing sentiment analysis would be really
Mm,
interesting because you can only gain so much from yes, no, or abstain. And abstain's the
yep.
weirdest one because there's nothing really to, that you can analyze. There is the absence of information, right? And I think you could contextualize some of the sentiments in the forum in the over the
Hmm.
discussion thread by running it through some kind of ML, right? Sentiment analysis. You could use, not necessarily AI. You could use like there were tools that were machine. I mean, there was machine learning way before AI that
Hmm.
was kind
Hmm.
of doing sentiment analysis on things, and you could detect topics. You could detect the general feeling and emotions, and you could maybe get a contextual understanding of the voting weights. Like, okay, it's
Hmm.
55% yes, 45% no. We're not yet at super majority, but what is the actual, how did we get here? What are people actually
Hmm.
feeling, right? Are they feeling, well, I'm gonna vote yes because this is the best option out of a bad situation, or am I genuinely excited about this? There's a lot of
Hmm.
nuance in like behind a vote, even if you're thinking about voting for like presidential candidates. Sometimes it's just
Hmm.
choosing the lesser of two evils. Sometimes, I don't know how often that is, but sometimes there's a good candidate that comes out, and that's a completely different sentiment, but technically you've done the same thing. You've given them a thumbs up.
Hmm.
Be nice to
Yeah,
understand the difference there.
that's a good point, and it brings up yeah, it brings up a lot of thoughts. It's like the way I think about what you said is, I mean, at least in the product sense, is like how would I productize it? Is like is a tool for like coalition building essentially, and so like
Mhm.
how to like bring better delegates to like the I don't want to say the market, but I'll just say the market. Um, because in general, yeah, the participation is low, and for better or for worse, it's still mediated through people who are thinking about the protocol on a day to day basis. And so, like, how can they best present their arguments based on the sentiment? How can they garner more delegations based on this? I think is like one way I could definitely see it kind of being taken up. So I'm going to take this back to the team. I don't know. It's interesting. It's yeah, and also yeah, no, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Sweet. I meant to ask, but I got carried away and I forgot. What chains do you actually support with Common?
Yeah, so it's all good. I mean, I've loved the conversation so far. The obviously Ethereum and or EVM chains.
Okay.
So we don't have a deployment on all EVM chains, but we're happy to. Um, kind of second are kind of Cosmos SDK based chains.
Oh, nice.
So we port. Yeah, it's been fun to see also just like the differences in the ecosystems and literally like you said, governance styles, how they vote, what the impacts of those things are. Um, we have some support for Polkadot chains, of course, still, and then we have just onboarded Solana. We don't have too many active communities there, but well, we'd love to, and I think it's a really cool ecosystem. Also, actually, in London, I feel like there's a vibrant scene there for Solana stuff.
There 100% is, and I feel like the meme coin ecosystem has shifted towards Solana. So I
Hmm.
expect that you're probably going to see some of these, some of the ones that survive and there are no rug pulls, that they might manage their governance on common. You never know. It's been a wild west. Like I'm not investing in meme. Well, investing is a big word. I'm not gambling on meme coins, but I have followed the kind of like the latest meme coins that are coming out, and I feel the situation's getting a bit weird with rug pulls that happen. Like something's launched 20 minutes later, it just
Mm.
rug pulls. Um, but then again, I guess that's what happens when you don't have an authority to tell people, hey, you can't do that. Instead, the SEC is concentrated on just labeling everything as a security and making life hard for everyone, apart from the scammers who actually profit massively
Right.
from this kind of thing.
Yeah, there's, I wish, I mean, from a platform side, like, because there's so many embedded problems, like you said, like from users that we've talked to, is like one, like devs should do voluntary locks, and of course, like it's kind of like a cat and mouse game. It's like they could lock this amount of tokens, but they could hide behind other addresses. So is there a way for like the dev to like really be truthful in that circumstance? But yeah, percentage of tokens locked could be like one cool thing, but
Mm.
just really to your former point of like, um, things kind of always get more serious, like whiff or bonk,
Yeah,
right? Like everything is like these are real cool ecosystems, right? And it's not just a coin anymore. And at the end of the day, like that's kind of the story of crypto, right? Bitcoin started on a listserv, and I mean, out of like the cyberpunk kind of communities, and same things are happening with meme coins. And so I don't know. I was trying to make a joke about like meme coin, stable coin, or something like that, but stuff is getting real, and yeah, as long as we can make it through Wild West period.
yeah, no, 100%. Well, there's, I think, with meme coins, the interesting thing is the community, because with things like Bitcoin, the community gathers around a very strong idea, right? A very strong ideology. It's about peer-to-peer decentralized money, electronic
Hmm.
money, right? With is dog with hat. Like, hey guys, hey, dog with hat. Like it's a very different kind of, and that also resonates with people, right? And there's a lot in there. There's a social science that can be applied with that, and
Hmm.
and it's one thing that kind of also fascinates me but confuses me about meme coins, is that how do you get people to rally behind something that virtually had no meaning before you created it?
Hmm.
Like, it's an interesting mechanism there.
It's actually, and so this is, as I think about like the sentiment analysis stuff, like, oh, like, I mean, I actually feel like that's a real, probably even maybe a more applicable product scenario. It's like, oh, how many, literally, I mean, of course, like we could just say, like, let's look at just like the Discord of XYZ meme coin, whatever it is, and says like how many people said rug pull, right? Like, and so
Right.
just to start to quantify that. But I feel like the thing, and this is really where I hope for crypto, and like how like I see us honestly like trying to like go to like help influence like society at large is, in the same way that like I'll use the internet metaphor again, right? So like the internet was like really good at sending information back and forth, and who knew like people love, apparently, cat memes, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, Web 2 is cat, love cats, but in Web 3 it's been dog coins, of course. um but yeah, what came after is like more serious stuff, and so but they don't have to start serious, and so creating the coin around that, creating the community around that, doing the sentiment stuff, and then becoming real. We definitely want to be a strong part of that, both from launching to the governance side. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, hopefully, we can do like another conversation 5 years from now and talk about this, and we'll have our AI chatbots assisting with us as well. They'll be participating and voting on our behalf, and I don't know. We'll be making millions of dollars and having them invest in new coins on our behalf or something like that. That's be an interesting world.
You'll get all the information just by thinking about it. We will
Exactly.
we just be telepathically sending thoughts to each other, and we're gonna have this middleware that's going to produce them into audio so that people listen to, or maybe just archives them as, I don't know, as abstract thoughts that people can just internalize without having to listen to them. Like
Oh, it's the
the
wild world.
I know kung fu, right?
Would that be the first skill that you learn? I mean, I'm, from the Matrix, like it's not a bad skill. Like, streets can be dangerous, so
Yeah,
worth knowing.
not a bad skill.
Yeah, it's funny.
Although I always thought that scene had a to me, I understand that you can train your brain to understand something, but you can't train your muscles to understand
Mm,
something unless you perform that, right? Like how would you how would you be able to learn kung fu simply by downloading books of kung fu into your brain
right.
without training your muscle memory to understand that? And sometimes even training your muscle, sometimes you just need core strength.
Yeah, I know. Do you follow Brian John? And like the only thing that comes to mind, and I'm
The
actually like in a
biohacker.
solution. Yeah, the guy, and
Yeah.
I I actually don't know the validity of science on this, so like really I could be a charlatan kind of talking about this, but like he has like muscle simulation things for his abs, right? And so like simulates 1,000 crunches or whatever without you getting sore. You don't get sore because there's no lactic acid buildup, but it still doesn't build that pathway.
Yeah.
At least you have one, two problems solved, maybe if the muscle stimulation works. But yeah, you're right. That muscle memory. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Another topic. We need a research DAO for that. We got to start with something, so we'll figure it out.
100%. Well, listen, what do you guys have planned for, I guess, then this year and the next year in terms of features, in terms of things that you want to announce, in terms of everything new and exciting coming up at Common?
Yeah. So it's a wide world out there. Lots of new coins, lots of new kind of like I guess like comms channels, ways to vote and stuff like that. So number one would kind of be like opening up integrations in like a permissionless way, hopefully, both managed first and then things beyond that. Um, One thing that we kind of talked about earlier in this call is like, okay, the core dev call is just core devs.
Right.
So like, how do you kind of gate these things with things that already happen on chain? So, an API or App Store would kind of be one. And then the second thing would be just kind of creating more of these engagement loops. So governance is one, and recognized delegates is one way to incentivize that.
Hmm.
Contests to kind of like find the best idea of the week for a topic or something like that, or best meme. Um, Doing that across other comms channels like Farcaster, like Twitter, like Telegram, like Discord, just to meet people where they're at. And then last is really launching, thinking about like, hey, like let's try to bring an idea on chain and make it real time, right? Because the coin, the community, and the vote, ideally that can all happen in one place. And it's not just an ICO, ideally. It hopefully can be something where, well, people are making whatever they want real with a set of folks all around the world. Um, I think those would be the two things: is opening ourselves up and then kind of expanding the loops that people can participate on in the product and protocol.
That's very cool. And is Common itself a DAO, or any plans to decentralize?
So we do have a set of smart contracts now. They're deployed on some EVM chains. Um, I think we're early, and like I feel like we're taking the same approach in terms of like how projects are. Um, I don't know, more product focused projects. So kind of mirroring that approach. But there is definitely a place for communities to participate, both from the feedback that we take in to governance of these contracts. So I'm definitely curious and thinking about those things, and hope to work with the community in the short and medium and long term. So we'll definitely see. I don't know. It could be cool.
No, that sounds very cool. That sounds very cool. And where's the best place for people to get started with Common if they want to understand it better, or if they want to start building their own community?
Yeah, they can go to common.xyz, and then from there They can, few clicks away from starting a community. Um, and if you wanted to reach out to me or find us on Twitter or Forecaster, I'm Dill Chen. Um, and we're common.xyz also on Twitter and just common on Farcaster. So pretty simple. But there's so many different things that we talked about, different communities that we see on it. We got to start a research DAO to figure out different governance systems. What else did we talk about? Like different agents that can help invest in different meme coins. Yeah, just like stuff like those are the things that we hope to see. So if you're interested in those things, hey, please reach out. Please start a community.
Please start a community. Yeah, definitely with the research DAO. Super interested in.
Yeah,
Like to see it
let's do it.
happen. Awesome, man. Well, listen, I had a great conversation, and I always love products in crypto that are concerned with adding to the overall crypto ecosystem, and I feel like Comet is one of them. It's something that everyone can potentially use, and it's just like, how Cosmos is sort of can be the gel for Web3 to
Mhm.
bring it all together, and this could be like the governance layer if you want. Is governance layer a term yet? If not, I think it's a cool term.
It could be us. It's governance is social, and it's one thing to drive your community forward. That'd be very important. And thank you so much for your kind words. It means a lot, and it's what we try to do every day.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and thanks again for joining, Dylan. I had a great chat, and
Yeah,
we'll speak
likewise.
soon, I'm sure.
Bye bye.
Right. Bye, everybody.